My name is Jesse Wieland. I'm the Associate Director at ONF. Sam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sam Beal. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them, and I am the program coordinator here at ONA.
And so we do have the recording started, right? Yeah. Good deal. So for those of you who might be new to the Office of National Fellowships, or if you haven't worked with us in the past, essentially we're a very small office. If you, by meeting Sam and myself, you've met half the office. But what we're here to do is to help students find the fellowships, the opportunities, internships, to engage in their studies, to develop the skills that they need, maybe for a graduate study, for professional work, for the research that they hope to do. And we are here to read through your applications, help you with the essays, manage all of the components, meet the deadlines that you need to. We're here as a resource for you. And so if you are also unfamiliar with the Honors Scholars and Fellows House, we house obviously ONF, the Center for Undergraduate Research and Academic Engagement, the FSU Honors Program, and on the fourth floor, the Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards, which is essentially the same work that we do, but focused at the master's or doctoral level. So the point is, we are here to make sure that these applications of yours are competitive as possible. In this case, for all of these different language fellowships that we are going to talk about, but we work with so many different awards and so many different sectors that, you know, as your interests might evolve, we can help you branch out. With some of these fellowships that we're going to be talking about today, you know, for example, for Boren, they highly recruit STEM students. And even though you don't always associate foreign language study with STEM fields, that is one of their prerogatives. So the point is there's a lot of intersectionality with these different fellowships. Just to kind of touch base on what is a critical need language, dependent on the fellowship that you're applying to, that's going to determine the definition. Typically, they are languages that are by and large within American higher education are under access, underfunded, understudied. And so, you know, you're going to be looking at, in many cases, Russian, Arabic, and Mandarin, and Portuguese. Many primary languages across all of these fellowships are going to be eligible, but then you also have like Hindi, you have Urdu, you have Punjabi, Bahasa, you know, many other languages. So the point for many of these fellowships is that they want to provide American college students with access to these languages. In many cases, on way towards maybe a career with the federal government, broadly speaking, as you define it. But in other cases, they care less what your professional career is, and they care more that you're committed to the study of the language, the use of that language. For example, I've worked with students in the arts and within music that are studying ethnomusicology and other fields. And for them to do their work well, to do the research well, to access graduate school, I need a very advanced proficiency in this language. So if you fall anywhere in that spectrum, then okay, great, these awards are for you. I kind of maybe have already touched on this. Yes, they are open to all levels of study. So if you're a first year student, I mean, even just look at the only one you wouldn't be able to apply to, I believe, is going to be Fulbright, JET, or EPIC, because they require that you have your bachelor's degree. But once you have your bachelor's, then again, you kind of enter into this area where there are many fellowships you're eligible for because you have your degree. But then for others, like Boren, the Critical Language Scholarship, I believe DAAD as well, you do need to be enrolled in a graduate degree program to be eligible. And then all of these scholarships are going to put you in the country where that language is predominantly spoken. Boren has a couple of caveats that we'll talk about in a minute, where they combine domestic and international study, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But essentially, I've kind of already alluded to this. Boren is, as they say, this is their language, they recognize themselves as kind of like a boutique fellowship because of their specific interest in federal service careers. You know, if I want to be a foreign service officer, I want to work for the Department of State, I want to work for the Department of Homeland Security, whatever that may look like. And if that's not your career trajectory, It doesn't necessarily mean you can't apply, but it may mean we should maybe focus on other fellowships, or get creative in how we define a federal service career. Now, Boren is also a nice fellowship to look into because their definition of a critical need language is far more expansive and nuanced than many other fellowships. When you look on their website, it's anywhere from like 40 to 60, somewhere in that range, different languages that you can study, as long as you can find a program, a university, that would provide that coursework. So that's why we're having this conversation with you now in September for something that is technically not due until the end of January. Our campus deadline is in November, but again, we'll talk about that more. My point is, your focus, if you're interested in Boren right now, should not be on the Boren application. It should be on finding the program, the language that you want to study. So use the resources available to you. Florida State University is much better than many different institutions in the US. We have a very robust international presence and many different study programs. So if you can't find the language of the university through FSU international programs, the Center for Global Engagement, or the Department of Modern Languages, then okay, then we should branch out, but use your resources here. So like I already said, this commitment to government service through Boren, in the years that I've been working with and reviewing for the Boren scholarship, usually the sticking point for a lot of students in terms of whether I do or do not apply is following your Boren experience. So, Boren's going to give you, depending on the length of your program, it's up to $25,000 to cover the cost of that program. So on the back end of that, after I finish my bachelor's degree, or my master's, if you are a graduate student, there's a 1-year commitment to work for the federal government. For students where that is, well, that's my career plan anyways, it's kind of a moot point. I'm gonna do that. So like, okay, then they look at that because, well, I get, as a Boren scholar, I get non-competitive status when I'm applying to these government positions, these entry-level positions. What that means is between you and another candidate, all things being equal, you are going to get the job offer because you're the Boren alum and they are not. For other students, they kind of see that 1-year commitment as like, okay, well, that is valuable work experience. Maybe I don't want to jump into that federal career just yet, but maybe I can use that to build my network, build my resume, and then I can pivot from there to graduate school, professional school, maybe whatever comes next, and then kind of figure out as I go what my career looks like. And so that's what is listed, that is what is listed here. Tier 1 agencies, Department of State, USAID, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and the intelligence community. That is a preferred career path for Boren. Now, for your 1-year requirement to work for the federal government, it does not necessarily have to be in these tier 1 agencies. That's why we have tier 2 agencies, Peace Corps, Department of Commerce, et cetera, and even tier 3 opportunities through the National Security Education Program. You are more than welcome to do these opportunities as long as you show Boren you've made a concerted effort to apply for these other positions. I mean, they are competitive. What you have non-competitive status doesn't mean you're going to get the position, the second or the third position you apply to, but you have that's why you have multiple years to fulfill that requirement. Does that make sense so far for Boren? I just want to make sure that we get the federal service requirement out of the way before we talk more about the opportunity. So whenever we're talking about the Boren scholarship, that is for undergraduate students. The Boren fellowship is for graduate level students, and they're exactly the same, except for the fact that for the Boren fellowship as a graduate student, you're also more than welcome to do research during your experience abroad. But for the undergraduate level, it's focus on the language study or focus on language-centered experiences. So what I mean by that is in your Boren application, what you are able to fill out is, okay, what coursework are you taking through your program? How many hours Are you going to be in the classroom? So maybe I'll be in the classroom for 20 hours a week. You kind of treat language study as your full-time job through Boren. But then you can also add to that experience, again, depending on the program. I've had students where it's like, well, I'm in the classroom 20 hours a week, but then because I'm going to be in Amman, or in this very specific city, again, wherever you hope to be, I have access to this internship opportunity through this nonprofit, through this whatever organization. I also have made contact already, or I plan to reach out to this organization and work there part-time, where I need to be using the language in addition to the study. So what I'm saying is, to make yourself as competitive as possible for Boren, you need to do a couple of things. You need to, you can fill out this very simple, kind of maybe grammatically incorrect sentence, but it doesn't matter. The point is still there. I need to spend a minimum of 6 months to be competitive for Boren, unless you're a STEM student. If you're a STEM student, you can study abroad just during the summer. That is okay. But for everyone else, it needs to be anywhere from 6 to 12 months. 8 is pretty common, or just the minimum 6. In this specific country, that is critical to US national security efforts. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So you need to be in a country where this language is predominantly spoken, because you want to address this very specific national security concern, on way towards a career in the federal government or position, again, as you define it. Now, when it comes to national security, you'll notice that Boren does not define national security on their website. That is because it is up to you to define. Something that will make a Boren scholarship application very uncompetitive, from personal experience, is when I can read through that application and it reads like a Wikipedia article. So I'm applying to, for example, the review committee that I was on this past year was for Mandarin. So there was a lot of applicants to China, to Taiwan, into that region. And you could tell which of these applications, it was just, oh, China the boogeyman, oh, China and, what was it? It was chips, computer chips, just these very basic narratives that, if me, and my background is in education, it is not in foreign policy, I could have written these essays if you gave me a solid, hour and a half and a Monster Energy, hell yeah, I can crank it out. That's not competitive. I have had students that have defined national security relative to public health, relative to human rights, the right to protest, relative to women's rights, many others. Students that have defined national security relative to open science and the sharing of data and information, relative to conservation and environmental efforts. Again, you need to make this unique to your interests, your passions, your studies, and find that congruency between the United States and the place that you're studying, and how can we come together? Again, you being this arbiter, this language study professional that, is going to be in this field doing this work. Questions so far, and please feel free to stop me or interrupt me, Sam, if anyone does have a question. Now, as I've been kind of hinting at, for Boren, you need to find your program. You need to find the university, the coursework, and again, our office can help you do that. I can connect you to professionals that I know on campus who work in this sector. However, that is for 95% of Boren applicants. You're going to need to find your program. However, if you are interested in any of the languages that Boren has these flagship initiatives with, this French program in West Africa, or any of these African languages, the Indonesian flagship program to study Bahasa, the South Asian program, or the Turkish program. The nice thing about that is you just apply to that program. It is already curated. These are the ones that I alluded to earlier, where it combines both domestic study over the summer, and then during the fall is when you go to country and study in country. So for example, the Turkish, the Indonesian, I can't speak to the South End, but at least these two both operate at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. If you've never been to that campus, it's gorgeous. It's a wonderful place to spend your summer. And then I believe the African flagship languages take place in Gainesville. No shade to Gainesville. If you've been in Tallahassee for a summer, you've been in Gainesville light for a summer. The weather is very similar. But the education is, chef's kiss, it's immaculate. You're going to be engaged, immersed, and like I said, this language study is your full-time job. So you do get a significant exposure to the language in the classroom with a conversation partner that they will pair you with, and many other cultural events throughout the experience. I will also mention these flagship programs are less competitive. These exist because they are the most under-applied to languages with the program. So the acceptance rate is about double what you would see for most other Boren languages. Now, that is not just a reason to apply, like you genuinely don't have interest in it. If it's not relevant, then you need to apply to what is, but it is something worth mentioning. If you're, kind of on the fence or maybe considering these languages, I would definitely encourage you to apply. STEM students, like I mentioned, minimum of 8 weeks, but they do make accommodations so you can have this experience because they understand STEM students and their schedules and their research can be more rigid. And if you're in the ROTC, that commitment meets Boren's commitment. They do really try to, this and many other fellowships, really try to recruit ROTC students, student veterans. That is another population that is very under-recruited nationally. Boren scholarship deadlines, and then I promise we're going to move on to other ones. Boren just has so much nuance to unpack. That's why I spend a little bit more time on it. We have a campus deadline November 14th. The reason we have a campus deadline that is optional, yes, I'm heavily biased. I would strongly encourage you to meet that deadline, is because if you submit, if you upload, we'll talk about the technicalities later, but if you upload all of your documents and you meet this deadline, I will coordinate an interview for you. I will pair you with one of the faculty members on our Boren campus committee that will meet with you one-on-one, review your materials, and give you feedback. And between the end of the fall and the beginning of the spring semester, it's that the national deadline for the scholarship, January 29th or the 22nd if you're a grad student. Between now and then, your faculty member that you interviewed with is going to write a university endorsement. It essentially kind of serves as an additional recommendation letter, but essentially saying Florida State University endorses this candidate. And they're able to maybe get at aspects of your character, your leadership potential, things that may not necessarily be in your letters of recommendation. It might be, but I think they're able to speak to more aspects of your excitement for this opportunity, maybe a little bit more nuanced than your recommenders might provide. So if you want your application to be as competitive as possible, November 14th, that is your deadline, and then we will still have time on the back end to make edits and improve the application. Just to briefly highlight the Boren scholarship recipients that we had this past year. Kate and Caitlin both applied through flagship programs. Kate applied for the Indonesian program to study Bahasa. Caitlin applied for Turkish. And then Shalom actually used one of Florida State's connections to study Russian in Latvia. So again, you don't have to go too far to find the programs that you want to access. So would be happy to connect you to any one of them if you're interested in those languages, or if you're interested in the experience of being a Boren scholar. Cool. Questions about Boren before we move on to other fellowships? I'm going to take a drink of water really quickly before we move on. Okay, usually these two scholarships come first in the presentation because it's very common for students to apply to them hand in hand. CLS is open and due sooner than Boren, so my recommendation is that you should be applying to CLS first. Use the materials you've developed for CLS to then apply for Boren. Now CLS is different. Same parent organization, IIE, the Institute for International Education, but a slightly different focus. So, while Boren's GAZE is a little bit more focused on the career objective and working for the federal government, CLS's objective is more so focused on the language. They really don't care where you go with the language. They care about congruency, like I said. So they want to see how are you committed to this language? And how are you going to continue studying it? They have you, explain that throughout the course of your application. So we have had first-year students that have applied to and received the Critical Language Scholarship. We have had, fourth and fifth year seniors apply and receive CLS. So this is one of the few fellowships where you can actually receive it multiple times. As long as you can continue to articulate, this is how I need to continue growing in my language proficiency. So CLS really intentionally does not market themselves as a, kind of like cutesy study abroad experience. We're gonna, just be having fun and just casually, speaking colloquialisms to each other, like, over like wine at dinner. I mean, you should do that in your spare time, but that is not this. They really try to be upfront, not to intimidate students, but just to let them know, okay, this is a rigorous summer program. Like, if you want to develop proficiency in this language, okay, we've got you. We will make sure that that happens, because they pair classroom study with 9 times out of 10, a home stay. So you're getting the language formally in the classroom and then informally at home in the community. You also have a language partner that will be assigned to you throughout the duration of the program. And then they also incorporate multiple site visits, guest speakers, other cultural events throughout the duration of the program. So you treat this as, this is my full-time internship over the summer. I am studying the language. Now, one of the other differences is that there is a smaller subset of languages that the CLS program prioritizes, many of which, Azerbaijani, Bangla, Hindi, Indonesian, Persian, Punjabi, Swahili, Turkish, and Urdu, do not require prior experience. This can be your first experience studying the language, again, as long as you can articulate why you need it. 1 year of study required for Arabic, Korean, Portuguese, and Russian. Now, if you are currently enrolled in at least one course in any of these languages, and you plan to be enrolled in the spring semester in that same language, you would technically, by the time you start CLS, qualify for that 1 year of study. So you are still eligible to apply, again, as long as you can lay out that timeline for CLS. And then 2 years of study required for Chinese and Japanese. Now, CLS Spark is a new program that was kind of spawned out of the pandemic, because obviously international travel was not happening. But CLS Spark, it's only for Russian, Chinese, and Arabic. And I believe for all of those languages, oh man, you might have to fact check me. This is getting deep into my fellowship knowledge on whether or not you need the same requirement. I want to say that you do not, but it was created to provide even more access for students. So the difference between CLS and CLS Spark, a CLS is going to be in person abroad. CLS Spark is only online. And it can complement other experiences that you're doing over the summer, but they largely exist for students who maybe do not have the privilege of being able to study abroad for many reasons, or they do, that maybe they have universities that they attend, or community colleges that they attend that just simply don't offer these language courses. So CLS Spark wants to be a point of access for you, but if you are at a university where these courses exist, then I might just recommend applying to CLS proper. Questions about the languages or the proficiency? So the application is pretty straightforward. Let me actually back up really quickly. For Boren, you have 2 essays that you need to write. They are both 800 words. One is the national security essay. The second is a combination, little bit of a personal statement, but primarily your academic and your professional trajectory essay. CLS breaks it down in multiple different ways. All of these essays, anywhere from like 200 to 300 words. I think the longest one is 500. Yes, the statement of purpose essay, which I would actually recommend writing first. But I digress. They're all asking you to unpack your interest in the language, so it's a little bit more piecemeal, which for some might be a little bit more approachable and easier, but either way, they're asking you to speak to your resilience, your preparation for CLS, citizen diplomacy. So how are you going to operate in this new space? How are you going to engage with the people, the place, the culture, and that commitment to language study? Like literally tell me, after CLS, I will be enrolling in, I'll be participating or volunteering in, I will be doing, like, what does that look like? The statement of grant purpose essay, the reason I recommend starting with it is because that kind of provides, the general overview of, hey, this is me, this is why I've chosen this language, this is why it's so critical to my future. Write that first, so then when you get to these shorter essays, you're not being redundant. Because there's nothing more deflating as a reviewer than when I'm reading through this application, I read the essays in this order, the short essays first, and then when I get to the statement of grant purpose essay, it's deflating when I just get an essay that is a regurgitation of what I just read. It provides no new information. So anyways, small piece of advice. So CLS gives you a very short time frame to apply. It opens at the beginning of October, and then I think it's due either the end of the first week, the start of the second week of November. So you have about 5 weeks to put an application together. And so again, more reason to work with the Office of National Fellowships. But these are two of our recipients this past year. Aria was at the end of her junior year when she applied. So now going into her senior year has significantly increased her proficiency in Arabic, but now our conversation is shifting to, okay, well, should we be applying to Boren? Should we be applying to Fulbright? Should we be applying to Wrangell, Pickering, Payne? That's kind of the benefit of applying to the scholarship as a lower division student, or, kind of a student, at the start of your third year, there's plenty of time. Rosalind, on the other hand, applied as a senior, and so finished her experience this past summer, and then transitioned into high school. I'm thinking backwards. Graduate school at the University of Hawaii, for her master's degree. And so again, you can think multiple years ahead when you apply, and you can kind of use, my justification for applying to CLS. Well, I've been accepted to graduate school. I'm starting in the fall, and I need this proficiency before I start. That is also a great narrative as well. So whether you're a first year student, whether you're a fourth year senior, does not matter, as long as you can make a case for why you need that language.
We have a question in the chat about CLS.
Absolutely.
So the question asker asks, I've been learning Portuguese since 2020. Do I still have to take a course to meet the prerequisite for CLS?
You do not. You can opt into that proficiency. I think a good parallel, I had a student years ago that took a gap year before starting at Florida State as a first year student. She spent the year in China, and her proficiency was at, if not above, the 2-year minimum, even though she didn't have formal coursework to show. Now just know and I'm confident you're going to be fine, but CLS will move your application forward with the understanding that you have the proficiency you say you have, but they then will schedule I think it's like a phone call or a Zoom call, where they will conduct that meeting in the language, and they will very quickly ascertain whether or not you have the proficiency you say you have, and if you do not, then you won't move forward. But if you've been studying even casually over the last 4 years, I'd be very confident that you have that 1 year that you need. So it's either 1 year of formal study or an equivalent experience in formal study, as long as you have that baseline. But that's a really good question.
A follow-up question, how would you opt in for proficiency if you're not showing that you have the classes and the application?
Well, I've also had students that have applied that are heritage speakers, but they were never taught how to read or write the language. You know, so it's like, yeah, I have proficiency, but these are the ways in which I need to grow. You kind of unpack that in your application. So don't let a lack of formal coursework prevent you from applying. Sit down and talk with me or Sam. We can work with you and kind of how to best present that. Yeah, but so CLS is they're flexible as long as you can demonstrate the equivalent of 1 or 2 years of study. It's a good question. But yeah, I'm going to move on. But please, if you have other questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. Now, the Gilman Scholarship, broadly speaking, is for Pell Grant recipients that are interested in a study abroad experience. You need to use it before you graduate, so you have to be an undergraduate. The Gilman Scholarship standard is $5,000 up to $5,000 that you can apply towards a language study program of your choice. However, if you receive a federal Pell Grant and your program abroad is studying this language, and it's the same list of languages for Gilman as it is for CLS, then you would technically qualify for the CNLA Gilman Award, which is up to $8,000 to study that language. Now, if you're applying to both CLS and the Gilman CNLA, I'm pretty confident you can't accept both of them. So, you know, applying to both of them just greatly increases your chances that one of them would work out. But the Gilman application is actually, it's due in just about a month, October 10th. And that could be, so the nice thing about Gilman is like a big sticking point for them is like access. They want students to have this opportunity. And so they understand the finances associated with it can be a limiting factor. So they allow you to quote unquote apply early. So I would apply, for example, October 10th for a program that wouldn't technically begin until the summer. Or maybe even next fall. Again, it depends on your program. And if that's the case, applying early makes it a little bit less competitive when you apply. But it also means if you don't get nominated, you can reapply for the March deadline for that same summer or fall semester. If that makes sense. So you kind of have like a 2-for-1 opportunity to be selected, but I can go ahead and tell you your application is already going to be more competitive than like your standard Gilman application because you're applying to one of these critical need languages. The application, the nice thing about Gilman is it's a little bit more seamless and I don't want to, it's not easy, but I think it's a little bit easier to tackle than say like a Boren application, which does require a lot of research and knowledge of national security, or at least the time it would take to educate yourself on that topic. Gilman is more focused on you, why you need to study this language, and where do you hope to be following this program abroad. And actually, Sam will be leading a writing workshop this coming Tuesday. The days are lost on me. I exist in a haze already. It is this coming Tuesday at 4 p.m., 4 to 8, in this room, HSF 3008. So if you would like to come by, learn more about it, and start putting some ideas together on your essay, we'd be happy to work with you. Fulbright. So this application cycle has already passed for this current cycle. But if you're interested in applying, you need to have your bachelor's degree before you could even start a Fulbright. So the earliest you could apply would be the like summer / very early fall. Like I said, it's September 12th. Our campus deadline was back in like late August. So just for a frame of reference, you can apply as like say a 4th year in a standard 4-year program to begin the following fall. So you literally apply a year in advance of when you would start the program. But once you have your bachelor's degree, you are eligible to apply for Fulbright all the way up until a terminal degree. And then once you have your PhD, then you would just be simply applying to like the faculty or scholar equivalent of a Fulbright, which is usually for a shorter duration. But Fulbright, it's anywhere from 8 to 12 or 13 months. I think South Korea has the longest one at 13 months. Months abroad to not necessarily study the language. You will undoubtedly have opportunities to do that. But Fulbright puts you at the front of the classroom with a partner teacher to teach English, where some of these countries necessitate, like for example, anywhere from Mexico to Argentina is going to require that you have at least intermediate proficiency in Spanish. Mexico is advanced, and I think there's one other country that has advanced. But my point is, if you're studying these languages, if you're studying Arabic, if you're studying Mandarin, if you're studying even Spanish or French, this could be a really excellent opportunity for you. So talk to us early. This application is, I would say, among like the top 2 or 3 in terms of like intricacy. It's challenging. It is not nearly impossible, but it is absolutely not something that you can crank out in 2 weeks. Like, you need a lot of time to prepare. But Fulbright also has research opportunities, graduate school opportunities. That's not limited to the English teaching. But for this presentation, I think it's the most relevant. But again, talk to us. Now, again, there's a lot of other government-funded programs abroad that can help you study very specific languages. So yeah, if I'm interested in studying Japanese, I can apply to Boren, I can apply to CLS, I can apply to JET. We actually, a former student of mine who graduated this past year, just finished her JET experience, is now back at FSU for her master's degree. So I would love to connect you so she can talk about her experience. But JET is pretty cool in that if you receive it, you can apply to be an alum or kind of mentor in the program and do JET for multiple years. Again, depending on your goals, depending on how you want to develop your proficiency, you can, and JET would put you in different locations for subsequent years. They want to make sure that the experience is also fruitful for you and you're not just there to train new people. But JET also, I believe, doesn't have a minimum requirement. So it can be a point of access, but for many students, they kind of treat it as a post-undergraduate experience, obviously because you're there for a very long time, for a full year. And what can be also exciting, but challenging about JET is that they're going to put you likely somewhere that's pretty rural, which, I mean, the entirety of Japan is a beautiful country. So you're going to have like an exciting experience wherever you go, but it is immersive. And so for some students, this is where opportunities through like Boren, through CLS, through Gilman, and many others for a shorter duration can be a really excellent practice before then taking on a program that's a full year or multiple years, just to kind of test those soft skills. How do you navigate isolation or maybe feelings of loneliness, or being the only American in this town? It's an exciting opportunity, but we also want to think about it pragmatically. But anyways, it's a funny connection, actually. The director, Michael Sappel, of the Boren program is actually a JET alum. So he's a huge advocate for the program. He's also, feel free to reach out to me. He's like happy to talk to any interested student about Boren, obviously, especially when it comes to the 1-year service requirement. But if you reach out to him, he'd also be more than happy to talk to you about JET, I'm sure. Now, very similar program, simply in Korea, is the EPIC program. Very similar in nature, very similar in focus. And so if you're studying Korean, this would be a really great program for you. So not to just kind of blitz through it, but they're very similar. Now, if you're also studying German, Florida State has a really fantastic German program, and Dr. Dana Weber, again, would be happy to connect you with her. She is always interested and happy to talk to you about the study of the German language, other cultural opportunities, other experiences in country, and Bonnie, my colleague in ONF, Bonnie Garcia Glockner, and myself were actually in Germany this past summer for a work trip focused on studying higher education in Germany, studying fellowships, how to get more students engaged there, because German higher education they are looking for more Americans to not just study the language, but to pursue graduate study in Germany. Graduate school is expensive. In Germany, it's basically free. what you pay for a fall and spring semester is like the equivalent of a semester's worth of student fees here. It's a few hundred US dollars. Very high quality programs. And so again, if you're interested in German study, DAAD has opportunities for both German study, they have government opportunities, they also have research opportunities. It's very diverse, but definitely a program to look into. I think it's also, yes, also Florida State has a really fantastic opportunity called the Maura Binkley Scholarship, which would fund you to go and study German at the University of Wuppertal in Germany. And so this is open. They love to see German study students that are committed to the language, but it is open to all fields of study. But come and talk to us. Dr. Weber and I are actually, well, we're a pretty small team, but we review all of the applications for this. It's due in mid-January. We haven't settled on a firm deadline yet, but we might even move that up a little bit to December. So talk to me if you're interested, but that's because we want to make sure, because you're going through the Center for Global Engagement at Florida State, we want to make sure that you are in line with the German education calendar, or higher ed calendar, to make sure that you get enrolled in your courses, no problem. So briefly, because I know we're running a little bit low on time, and I want to make sure we have time for questions at the end. The benefit of working with the Office of National Fellowships, these essays, these applications are a very low risk, high reward opportunity to, at the very least, take stock of where you are in your education at Florida State, take stock of the goals that you have moving forward, the skills that you need, the knowledge that you need to be successful in that career, to be eligible for these programs that you're considering. And at the very least, we hope that working with our office develops the skills and the writing that you need to have competitive essays. At the very best, we send students to these programs every single year. So, the only way to ensure that you don't receive it is to not apply. Now, these applications also force you, in many cases, most cases, to submit anywhere from 1 to 3 letters of recommendation. Those need to come from faculty or relevant staff that have seen you perform well in the classroom, perform well at your job, perform well in your research, whatever that looks like. But you need those letters of recommendation regardless of these fellowships. You need them for graduate school, professional school, for jobs, for internships. So if you don't have that right now, it's not a reason to panic. Go to office hours, start in the very basic form of go talk to your faculty, start building that relationship. And you'll also find these essays, these applications, they are asking you the exact same questions that any other job or internship or graduate program are going to ask you. It's who are you? Why do you want this? Where are you going as a professional, or as an academic? If you can answer it for these fellowships, you can answer it for those programs. And if you're in your first or second or even your third year, you're going to be much better at answering it by working on these applications, working with our office than you would be otherwise. This is our contact information. So please feel free to follow us on social media, specifically on Instagram or on LinkedIn. We recently deleted our Facebook, and it was a very euphoric moment for me and everyone else in the office. So, if you're also on the fringe, take the deep dive. But I'm mostly kidding. We just don't get much engagement on that platform anymore. But on Instagram and LinkedIn, we post about these workshops. We post about alumni conversations and talks that we add throughout the year. For example, I'm currently trying to finalize a schedule with Hannah Myers, who is a recruitment coordinator from the Boren Scholarships. She's going to be on campus on October 3rd. We haven't posted about it yet because it's simply, we just haven't finalized it, but there will be a presentation at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time in HSF 3008, this room, to discuss the Boren Scholarship with even more depth. But my point is, we love to bring back alumni of Florida State, representatives from these different fellowships, so follow us there. Or if you reach out to us via email, or if you reach out to us directly, with your availability, days and times that work for you, we'd be happy to sit down and have a conversation about your goals, these deadlines, and start drafting an application. That is all I have. So thank you so much for joining. I'm going to be hanging around with Sam for a few more minutes. If you have questions, please feel free to type them into the chat. Feel free to ask. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate you being here, and look forward to talking to you more.